This is our ozone layer notes. Learn about all sorts of stuff with ozone. First of all, what is ozone? Ozone is a molecule that's made of 3 oxygen atoms. That's all it is. Ozone is just this little molecule that's made of 3 little tiny oxygen atoms. So O3 means ozone. Here's a side note. The oxygen that we breathe is an O2 molecule. So what you're taking a deep breath of, trying to get into your lungs, is O2. If you have 3 oxygen atoms bonded together, you have an ozone molecule. Okay, so the ozone layer, if you remember from the notes, the ozone layer is at the top of the stratosphere. But, well, it's located in the stratosphere is the first thing you need to know. The other thing I want you to know is that the ozone layer absorbs most of the incoming ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Most. Now, if you've ever had a sunburn, you've gotten that sunburn because this word is most and not all. If I wrote the word all here, then you wouldn't have gotten that sunburn. It's that UV light from the sun that you're getting burned from. So UVA here, this is the color that's just barely more powerful or more energetic than violet light. So on a rainbow, violet's the last color we see. Well, UVA light is just a little bit more energetic than that. Our eyes can't see it, but the ozone layer filters out some of it. So here's a bunch of UVA light coming from the sun. The ozone layer takes out some of it. UVB light is even more energetic. The ozone layer takes out almost all of this stuff. UVC, this is the worst, most highest energy light from the sun. The ozone layer absorbs it all. Alright, so here's a picture of some sunscreen. And if you notice, this sunscreen is designed to absorb UVA and UVB. For a long time, sunscreen only absorbed UVA, but that UVB could still get you a burn after a while. So now the better sunscreens all say either broad spectrum or they say UVA, UVB on them. Okay, so I wish this was the end of our notes, but there's more to say because there's this thing called the hole in the ozone layer, and this thing was caused by CFCs. Now we saw these in the last lesson. CFCs are a greenhouse gas. CFCs were first used after World War II in refrigerators and air conditioners, and everyone wants a refrigerator. Everyone wants an air conditioner. It's pretty understandable why we made so many of these. People didn't know what CFCs were doing. Well, what they were doing was every CFC molecule that gets in the air can destroy thousands of ozone molecules. So one refrigerator, we know once it gets old and finally leaks all the CFC up into the air, each one of those molecules destroys thousands and thousands of ozone molecules. Okay? And I'm so glad there's this thing called NASA, and they're looking at our atmosphere, because what they saw when they were looking is this hole forming. They must have started getting data on it in 1980. 81, 82, 83, they see the holes getting bigger. And this was pretty scary because the ozone layer, without the ozone layer, you'd get a sunburn in about a minute. You'd walk to your car and you'd have a sunburn. Do you think plants could survive in that? No. So without plants, it's bad news. People were nervous. People didn't know where it was going. So it was scary times. The hole in the ozone layer, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a large hole in the ozone layer formed. Okay, and that led, people got nervous enough that they actually decided to do something about it. It led to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. So on that. Now, the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, in 1987, many countries got together and agreed to ban CFCs internationally. So this is kind of a success story. We figured out CFCs cause this bad thing to happen in the ozone. We want the ozone to be here, so we banned CFCs. We replaced them with what are called HCFCs. But you don't need to know that. You just need that we banned the things that were doing all the damage. And the good news, and this is just recently, this has been studied, and they found that by 2050, the ozone layer should be nearly back to where it should be. So in 35 years, the ozone layer should be recovered, or at least nearly recovered. So here's what it's looking like in 1990, 91, 92, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2003, 2004. It's not looking like it's getting any bigger anymore. The last data was from 2010, and it's shrunk a little bit from where it was. It was about this big at its worst. Okay, so it's not healed yet, but like we were saying, by 2050, hopefully it's probably pretty gone. That's what we're hoping. Now, on to the next page in your notes. So, ozone. Ozone is good, ozone is bad. This note sheet should help us organize our thoughts on it though. So, in the stratosphere, the ozone layer, what does that do? The ozone layer helps to do what? Please. Go ahead, listen. So it filters out UV light. So UV light is coming from the sun. It hits a particle of ozone and the ozone absorbs it. Makes that ozone kind of hot. And that's why the stratosphere gets so nice and warm. UV light's coming from the sun. Ozone absorbs it. Okay. Does it absorb all ozone or all UV light? No. Do we want to get more specific? UVC is absorbed every time. UVB most of the time. What about UVA? Does it absorb UVA light? No, it's not. What is UVA light doing? Come on now. UVA light goes right on through, makes it to the ground, and this is what gives you a sunburn. So you got a sunburn because the ozone layer doesn't get all the UV light out. But the worst UV light gets captured by the ozone layer. Anyway, so this means that ozone is good because ozone blocks UV radiation from the sun. Okay? This should say most UV radiation from the sun, right? Not all, but in general, this stuff is pretty terrible. This would be cooking everything. No plants could survive. It would be terrible. Up next. So, ozone is also doing something else in our atmosphere. This one is not so good. Does anyone know what this is? You've done the homework already, so we should know. What is ozone doing in the atmosphere here?
Increasing global warming.
It's basically trapping heat that would otherwise be going off into space. So here's some heat. I will make it. So here's some infrared heat. It would be going right off into space. But ozone is a greenhouse gas, and it reflects it back down to Earth. Does that make the Earth feel cooler or hotter? Hotter. Girls, remember putting that space blanket around you? That's exactly what's happening here. Your heat was bouncing off the blanket, going back to you, and you felt really warm really fast. It's reflecting heat back towards Earth. This is, I put an IR there. What does IR stand for? Infrared. infrared radiation. It's getting bounced back. And we could word this by saying ozone traps heat in the atmosphere, also known as the greenhouse effect. Ozone traps heat in the atmosphere, also known as the greenhouse effect. Now what we're about to see, the greenhouse effect could be over here. On the whole, the greenhouse effect is a good thing, but because the title of these notes is the good and the bad, we'll put it in the bad side because we've got too much of the greenhouse effect these days. So this is no longer such a great thing. The greenhouse effect. Now, towards the bottom of the page, I gave you this little smoke, this little factory that's giving off pollution. It's got a smokestack and it's polluting. What's the ozone doing in this case? Noah?
It's cleaning out the pollutants.
Cleaning out the pollutants. It's breaking down pollution and making it less harmful, basically. You know, I did most of the drawing for you. Ozone helps clean up pollution in the air. And it really does. Helps break it down. Now, if you did want to add something to these notes, you could put a bad right here. And then over here, put a less bad. Are they good? No, but they're not as bad. So, last one. What about ozone on the surface? Let's say there's a little door in our factory. Here's a little dude walking out of our factory. He's walking out and breathing in some of that ozone. Good thing or bad thing, and or why, Alyssa? Yes. And ozone damages our lungs. For example, people are much more likely to get asthma as a result of ozone in the air we're breathing. It doesn't take much. How many of you drew the little person coming out of the factory?
I did not.
A couple of people. Why is it a good idea to do that? It's a good idea to do that because if you forget everything on this side, but you remember you drew a little person right here, could that person help you remember what's going on? Absolutely. I would remember the person first before I remembered what these notes said. That's why I would, you could go so far as to draw them breathing in ozone. I would remember that picture first. That's me, though. So, is ozone good or bad?
Both.
Both. Is it more good or more bad? Would it be better if we had no ozone at all?
No.
The answer is definitely no. This top, this right here is huge. Without ozone, we're done for. No more crops, no more plants, no more photosynthesis, because it would all just cook under all this radiation. So ozone is overall pretty good, except when you're breathing it, for the most part. Great job.